So let's talk about bushings. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Some people call them bushes, some people call them bushings. We're talking about the rubber blocks that connect your suspension components together. So generally your suspension system is a series of connections to various arms, control arms and different supports within the suspension system to connect it to the car's chassis. So if they were metal connections, they would wear very quickly. You would get a lot of noise and vibration coming from the road into the cabin itself. So manufacturers generally use rubber bushings. So they're generally round in shape. They've got a central part that mounts to the car's chassis, for example, and the outer part will mate to a suspension component. So it just gives a little bit of extra cushioning. Now, over time, these rubber bushings will degrade. So the question is, do you replace these rubber bushings with polyurethane ones? What are the pros and cons of fitting polyurethane bushings? Is it a decent mod? Is it a decent upgrade? Will you notice a difference in the performance of your car? So this video is just going to cover the pros and cons of having polyurethane bushings on your car and just looking at the benefits of changing the bushings if they've started to wear and degrade over time. So rubber itself will degrade as the car gets older through all of the vibrations that it's been experiencing through its life. The rubber is going to deteriorate and eventually you're going to start to hear noises. The components that were supported by the rubber bushings are now flopping around a little bit and knocking on each other. So knocking noises on a car with a high mileage is often down to worn bushings within the suspension component. So there are generally large bushings which carry a lot of the stress and weight, and smaller bushings which are generally there to just make sure everything is aligned properly and things are mating at the correct angles. So as the bushings degrade, you will obviously get more vibration, there will be more play in the suspension system. So that will adversely affect the car's handling. As you start to turn a corner, there's a little bit more leeway in the suspension and the geometry of it. So you're not getting the maximum amount of cornering. The tyre's angle to the road is somewhat compromised just through having that worn suspension bushing. So upgrading them is a good idea. It tightens things up. So you can get manufacturer grade OEM replacement rubber bushings, which do a lot to address the performance loss that you get with those older bushings. But a lot of people ask us about polyurethane bushings. So polyurethane is a type of plastic substance. It's harder than rubber. You can get different grades of polyurethane now. So the general idea is you fit polyurethane bushings into your suspension system and they last longer and they provide more control and prevent that deterioration over time. So what's the catch? What's the trade-off? Well, they're firmer than the rubber ones. So you will get more NVH, noise, vibration and harshness. You'll experience those additional problems. The car will be a little bit more noisy as you drive around, as you get the shocks off the road. They're not being absorbed by those rubber bushings. I have to note as well that some manufacturers have got very, very high-tech bushings on their car. The Civic, for example, had liquid filled bushings to provide an additional amount of cushioning to smooth out the ride. So obviously if you got that set up and you replace it with polyurethane, you're going to experience a lot more road shocks, a lot more noise. And for a lot of people, that's not really a compromise that they're willing to make. The other thing is they can start to squeak. Whereas rubber is relatively soft and forgiving, as the polyurethane starts to wear a little bit, you start to have these squeaking and clunking noises coming from the bushing itself. So I've seen various solutions out there that allegedly prevent these polyurethane bushings from squeaking. There's one chap, he always swears by wrapping a PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene tape, around the bushing before it's mounted. There's various other lubes and substances that you can put on the bushing to just prevent these noises from happening and prevent the long-term wear and tear as the bushing is actually doing its thing. So for most drivers then, if you want the ultimate performance, the polyurethane bushing is obviously the way to go, but you have that trade-off of the extra noise, the extra vibration, the extra harshness. If you can't live with that, there may be a middle ground. You don't have to go for rubber bushings all round. We said at the beginning there are different bushings for different parts of the suspension system. So replacing the larger ones that take most of the road shocks with OEM replacement rubber ones, and the smaller ones that are generally there to keep everything aligned with polyurethane, seems to be a good strategy, a good compromise, giving you the best of both worlds. Depending on the car you've got and the suspension you've got, you should really invest in a little bit of specialist knowledge. There's various cars out there like the Alfa Romeo Mito, which is actually designed as the bushings flex and flow, it enhances the steering and the cornering of the car. So replacing those OEM bushings with polyurethane ones that don't give the same amount of flex, it will actually degrade the cornering ability of the car. So it's certainly not a one size fits all. You need to investigate really the type of suspension setup that you've got and really what the pros and cons for your specific suspension setup are. So in the main, most people will be better off with large rubber OEM replacement bushings and going for polyurethane ones for the smaller areas on the suspension system. If they're fitted properly lubricated and mounted, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with the squeaking, but you may still get a little bit more vibration coming from the suspension from the road up into the car chassis itself. So I hope this video has been useful to you. Please boot that like button because that really does help us to get out there. And I've lined this video up for you. If you're interested in improving the performance of your car, this is a video for you. I'll see you in the next video. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. We'd love you to stay tuned.